I know really think long and hard is how do you both find, have access to, and then convince great entrepreneurs to take your capital, because that last point is the most critical one, which is in startups, you have to convince the founding team to take your capital. And so you really need to think about what's your edge. How do I convince the entrepreneur that I can add value to them? How do I convince them that I'm able to do something for them that other venture funds can't?
I learned that the most important report you should be paying attention to is just cash flow. Your P&L can be a number of different things based on how you choose to kind of finesse things, but cash is king still. And businesses don't die because they make a wrong hiring decision necessarily. They die because they run out of cash.
Absolutely. I mean, you definitely have to execute. I would add one more thing to that. One thing that I think really drove a lot of my career was my comfort in taking risk. I am American. I had never even set foot in Nigeria before. Didn't know anybody in Nigeria when I took the job and moved out there. A couple years later, I left a job, was in Nigeria without a visa. Don't tell the authorities, by the way. No job, no house, because I wanted to build my own platform. And when I did, I put all of my own personal money into it, right? I did deals with my own bank account. Couldn't even get my parents to help with that funding. They didn't really believe in the opportunity. And it was that willingness to take risk and the conviction in really the opportunity set that I saw.
So that led me to going to business school. I moved back to Nigeria briefly. I actually worked with what is now Jumia, but when it was something else, it was Sabunta and Kasua, so very early stages of Jumia. And for me, that was just, I was moving back to Nigeria as an adult, and I was seeing a certain energy in people in Nigeria, just keen to do something with their lives, keen to build something that didn't exist before. And it was such an exciting time.
So, I mean, Selma has a great background in fintech. That was the one thing. And then on the other thing, like this is where we see the biggest market opportunity in the next decade. You just have to look at the number of banks on the continent and how many people they serve, and the massive gaps that are existing in the financial space in Africa. And we believe fintech has a very good opportunity to be servicing the needs of a fast-growing population at a much greater speed than the traditional incumbent players.
Maybe just to add to that, as my journey actually started in Africa in fintech in 2012, it was a very interesting time, to see how are we building financial services for the masses, right? Leveraging that infrastructure, which was telco networks. Telcos came in the early 2000s and built the towers, and suddenly people had mobile phones. So when we built emPawa, we were testing something, but today is a 1 billion revenue business last year. It's a huge business. But I think the most important thing that we were able to prove back then is that we can build these huge, sustainable, profitable businesses by serving the low purchasing power masses. So people who are perhaps transacting microtransactions and less than $300 a month, but by doing and enabling them to do so in a more convenient and cost-effective way, we are including them in the formal economy and unleashing the GDP growth. So the proof that businesses can be built serving the masses in financial services, something that banks never did before. Banks only used to serve the rich and don't even, ignore the middle class, lower middle class, and the working class in terms of income.
They have not been able to launch new ventures or to grow their ventures just because they haven't had access to capital. So the battle is no longer just about media and image and the African narrative. It's also about how do we create sustainable companies? How do we create more African unicorns? How do we create more companies that are led by women and people of color? Because in the US, what's happening is 98% of all the venture capital dollars go to white men. And we feel like it's time to change that.
So that's a lot of patience from my parents with the amount of investment they put into my education. But I think that 19-year-old Mr. Eazi is just pitch more, because there used to be this fallacy of keeping ideas to yourself and not telling anybody. So, I'll have these ideas and I won't want to tell anybody these ideas because I felt, you have to keep your ideas to yourself. And, by later on, thankfully, not so long, by 23, I realized that, wait a minute, I was doing myself a disservice by keeping to myself.
Hey, if you liked today's story, press like, leave a comment, subscribe, come back for more stories from the founders and the funders, changing sports, tech, and entertainment from Africa to the rest of the world. We look forward to seeing you again soon.